You don't need to be the tallest player on the floor to block shots. You don't even need a 7-foot wingspan or a 40-inch vertical. Some of the most impactful blocks come from the smallest players on the floor. And in this video, we're breaking down 6 game situations where undersized players can rack up more blocks, and the one technique that makes it all possible. So let's get started with that key technique, the release point block. Most smaller defenders don't block the flight of the ball. They block the release point, and that changes everything. Instead of going vertical, the defender needs to time their jump to meet the release point, using their inside hand to reach across and get to the outside shoulder, often sliding just behind the offensive player's back. It's fast, it's sneaky, and when done right, it's one of the cleanest ways a smaller player can get a highlight reel block without even risking a foul. Let's get on the court so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about.
Now we're on the court, and let's cover the 3 tips to get more blocks, especially as an undersized player. So the first tip is, we're not trying to block the ball. We're trying to block the spot the ball needs to go to. So if this player is about to finish a layup, where do we know the ball has to be? Usually 9 out of 10 times, outside hand finish. Especially, let's say we had a Helpside defender who's at the rim already. We know this ball needs to travel through this spot. So we're not trying to block the ball. A lot of players make that mistake. They come in here and they're trying to locate the ball, and they come down with their hands, they swat, they go through the player. Now you're putting your team in danger, because guess what? He might not have made the basket, but he's going to the foul line. So we're not trying to block the ball. We're trying to locate the spot the ball needs to go. Now we have to go to tip number 2. We need to get to that outside release, okay? So as this player's going up for his finish, my inside hand right now is my left hand, and I need to jump to Sean, this offensive player's outside shoulder, to get to this spot. In that way, I am almost scraping his back. I'm not making contact with him. I've located my spot. I'm taking my inside hand and I'm jumping to the outside shoulder to block this spot, right? Because I know that spot's gonna be there. The third tip, of course, is we need to time up our jump, our release. I'm timing up my steps so that when he takes his final step to go release, I'm jumping already, going to that outside spot to block it. Let's see what that looks like in real time.
Now that you've seen the technique, let's take it one step further. These are the 6 most common game situations where smaller players can use the release point block to make a real defensive impact. And let's start with one of the most exciting, the chase down block. This is the cleanest situation to apply the release point technique. There's no traffic or contact, just timing, positioning, and one key decision: when to go for it. First, you don't want to go for it early. You don't want to flare out or even race to the outside shoulder right away. If you do, the offensive player might sniff it out and counter with an inside hand finish, a reverse, or do something crafty. Instead, you want to stay stalked behind, influencing them to use their outside hand. You can see in this play, Draymond Green can see Jeremy Lin just so slightly on the inside of him. But then, as he gathers to go up for it, Jeremy Lin rises with him, but gets to the outside shoulder and gets to that release point. Which brings up another important topic, the timing of your jump. At full speed, you'll usually need to be a half step ahead of the offensive player's gather and takeoff. You can see in this play, the defender's final step is just ever so slightly before the offense's. This is especially important if you're undersized, because you'll need to jump slightly before the offense to have a chance to catch that release. But when done right, the result is a clean, momentum-changing play ready for any highlight reel, without being 6'7". Now, this isn't the only situation, and let's take a look at another, this time when you're in the gap. Very few players recognize this position as a shot blocking opportunity, but the best defenders do, guys like Dwayne Wade, Alex Caruso, Derek White, and so many more, because they know exactly when the ball is going to be exposed. Here in this play, Brunson's head is down. He's locked in on his drive, focused only on beating the on-ball defender. Caruso sees this. He's in the gap to start, but he sees the star player driving to score with his head down, and Brunson can't see him anymore. This is the perfect time to go for that release point opportunity. Caruso rotates down from the gap and jumps across to get to the outside shoulder, swiping high and blocking the shot. You'd be surprised at how many gap block opportunities are really available, especially with the buddy block concept. This occurs when one defender is already walling up the ball, taking away the inside hand finish. And so the second defender coming into the play knows that outside hand release is coming and the ball is going to be on a platter to go block it. You'll also see these gap block plays on spins and fadeaways. If a scorer turns away from the gap, loses vision, that's your green light. Go make a play, especially if you know he has a particular move in his arsenal. The last gap to be aware of is from the corner. Some coaches teach no help from the strong side corner at all. They want to prevent those kick out threes. But oftentimes elite defenders are reading the intent of the driver. If that player is clearly committed to going up for that rim finish, and that layup attempt is going to be with the outside hand, well, that corner gap is in a great position to go get it. These plays aren't reckless gambling. They're precise, based on reading vision, intent, and when the outside hand release is going to be there. Now let's pivot to what happens when you're on the ball, a much harder angle and situation to get a block. Because in order to get a block on the ball, you usually have to break your positioning, but that's a risk sometimes worth taking. Let's say, for example, the offensive player has already driven you deep into the paint to a point where just walling up will still give them a clean, comfortable finish. In these moments, staying square might not get you the stop you're hoping for. So instead of trying to wall up, you take a risk and you go for the block. Now, there are two ways to do this. First, you can slip in front of the attacker, avoiding contact and attacking that outside hand release. It's rare, but if you anticipate it early, you can jump across and maybe erase it. The second way is to let them go by ever so slightly, almost like you're pulling the chair, and again using your inside hand to chase that outside shoulder, swiping for the release on the way up. It's not always clean, it's not always safe, but when you're in a tough situation, it's sometimes your best and only option to come up with that stop. And not to mention, if you do have the size or athleticism, this could be a great technique to add to your defensive bag, especially against smaller drivers who do a great job of using their body to shield you off. But honestly, the most common on-ball block situations are going to come from recovery, when you're pressuring the ball and you get beat. Now, instead of giving up on the play, you're still trying to get back into it, using what looks identical to that chase down block, but this time in the half court and in recovery. These are the types of plays, a defensive option from behind a play, that made OKC's defense so elite this year. Not only blocks, but all their shadow steal attempts, never giving up on a drive and never giving up on a play. Of course, you can watch that entire breakdown on this channel and the link below. But now let's get back to these situations and let's move off the ball again. This time you're rotating from help side. Help side rotations are where the big shot blocking centers often shine. They have the ability to go protect the basket by intercepting the ball's path to the rim. But as a smaller player, that kind of vertical protection isn't an option. So how do we still make a difference on the back line? Well, you really only have three options. Number one, you can rotate over and take a charge. This is one of my favorite options for undersized players, and we did a whole breakdown on the art of charge taking. But that's not your only option. Number two, you can wall up the finish. This is typically advised, especially if you're not there early enough to take a charge, but again, being an undersized player, that wall up might not be super effective. And so our last option, number three, is to go for the block. In this case, you're not trying to contest the ball at the rim, you're disguising your rotation, staying upright, maybe even looking like you're about to wall up the ball, but your momentum is taking you ever so slightly to the outside shoulder where you can swipe high at the release. Just watch Derek White here rotate over and look like he's going to wall up the ball in a fundamental Helpside rotation. But instead, he moves ever so slightly with his momentum to the outside release and is able to contest and block the shot. This is that release point block hidden inside a help rotation. You're not contesting the rim, you're contesting the release. Now let's look at how this works in other kinds of rotations, especially in what coaches call help the helper. What this means is that when the low man, the guy responsible for helping and protecting the rim, has to rotate to take away the layup, he leaves his man wide open. On good defenses, that triggers a chain reaction, where the next player has to cover up and rotate down to his man. But sometimes, the defender's late. Here's what most players get wrong though. When those bigs catch the ball there, they don't always explode up for a high release. They try and get it up fast, almost like a hot potato, before their man can recover. And that rushed finish, that's your window. Even on a late rotation, you can still jump down, avoid contact, and swipe at the outside hand release before it leaves their fingers. You'll see the same thing in pick and roll rotations as well. The roller is wide open, but again, they're trying to rush their finish with a low release. Even from behind, you still got a chance to come block that shot. Late doesn't mean out of the play, not if you know how to read the finish and time the release. So now that brings us to our last and our most risky situation, blocking a jump shot. I'll say this up front, most coaches, including me, hate this. And they're not wrong. We don't want to foul jump shooters. Leaving your feet on a shooter can lead to fouls, and we would almost always prefer a high-level contest. But that doesn't mean the opportunity is never there. Jump shots are actually at a lower release point typically than a high-level finish, which means if you time it perfectly, there's a chance to get there, especially when you're coming from behind. Just like the release point block on a drive, you can sweep across high, avoid contact, and attack that release of the shot. This only works if you don't go through the body. You have to use a flyby and limit your contact, take a clean angle, and meet the ball high at its release. It's a calculated risk, but with the right read, right angle, and right timing, even jump shots can be blockable. So whether you're trailing in transition, rotating late, or taking a gamble on the ball, the release point block gives smaller defenders a way to make big time plays. Clean, sneaky, and perfectly timed. One technique, 6 situations, and a way for smaller defenders to just maybe dominate the paint. And if you're serious about building elite defensive skills and want to go even further, check out the Lockdown Academy, our online training platform for elite defenders. And make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss our next breakdown. As always, I'm Coach Mike with Lockdown Defense. Keep up the hard work.